It was the day I had to make a choice. I had suspected for some time that something was going wrong, but I was afraid to admit it to myself. But it was time to put a stop to it. All I needed was proof, and I found more than I could have ever hoped for. Stay until the end to find out how I used it all. The workshop always felt like my space. Neat rows of tools, the soft hum of machines, the scent of sawdust and oil. That morning I was printing out some hiking photos, an old project I'd put off for too long. I didn't expect to find the start of an unraveling. The image came out half-toned and sun-soaked. A cozy shot from a trip June had said was just the girls. A tent by the river, nothing strange. But then I saw it, her hand, unmistakably hers, resting gently on someone else's wrist. Fingers curling, intimate. In the background, a man's silhouette half-shrouded by the tent flap. I stared at it for a long time, thinking maybe it was some trick of the light. But I know her hand. I've kissed those fingers, held them through both births of our kids. I loaded the photo into my editing software and pulled up the XCF data. The timestamp hit like a gut punch. That wasn't her girls' weekend. That was during a 3-day medical seminar she insisted she couldn't miss. I went back to my calendar, double-checked. She'd been so convincing about that trip. Hell, I even packed her suitcase that morning and kissed her goodbye in the driveway. She wore a gray cardigan and little stud earrings I gave her for our 10th. The memory soured now, stained like old wine on white linen. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that photo, that hand. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I left the kids with my sister, told her I needed a solo hike to clear my head. I drove 2 hours to that exact forest and wandered until I found the clearing from the photo. Still looked almost the same. Burned logs scattered around a shallow fire pit. Empty whiskey cans, one rusted halfway through, tossed carelessly near a rock. I kicked at the ashes and felt something metallic beneath my boot. A knife. Old, heavy, the kind that stays with a man. Its wooden handle was worn, and on one side crudely carved initials. BT, I didn't take it. I left it there, snapped a photo instead, and backed away like I'd touched a ghost. I didn't want it in my pocket. Not yet. Back home, June didn't notice the change in me. Or maybe she did and chose to pretend everything was fine. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling while she showered. The sound of running water felt too loud, like it was washing something away I hadn't agreed to lose. When she climbed in beside me and reached for my arm, I didn't move. I let her hand rest there, light as paper, but it might as well have weighed 100 pounds. The next few days I went through everything with fresh eyes. Her phone habits, her sudden absences, how she never forgot birthdays, but always forgot where she left her phone. Then, trash night. The kitchen garbage bag was full, and I was tying it up when I saw something odd. Torn paper. A few lines in handwriting I recognized but hadn't seen in a while. Her old loopy cursive, used when she wasn't thinking. I pulled the letter out piece by piece, reassembling it at my desk by lamplight. Every line tore a little deeper into me. I'm scared he suspects something. The key is under the root, like we agreed. I read that sentence over and over. The key. A buried key. I spent the rest of that night sitting in the dark, the pieces of the note spread in front of me like a crime scene puzzle. My brain turned over everything. Every detail she'd ever said about the garden, about hiding things from the kids, about things she said were just between us, but none of them matched. The next morning I dressed the kids, dropped them off at school, kissed them like it might be the last time I'd see them, without bitterness. Then I walked to the backyard, boots crunching the frosty grass. The old oak by the back fence stood tall, unmoved by any of this. Its roots were gnarled and thick like bones trying to crawl out of the earth. I dug beneath the biggest one. 6 inches down, the shovel hit something metal. It was a box, a weatherproof, sealed steel box. Inside, a key attached to a plastic tag marked 45A, a garage unit. No address, no logo, just that. And one more thing, a pregnancy test. Not just any one. It had the date on the plastic, 6 months before our youngest was born. And it was positive. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it knocked the wind out of me. 6 months before our son, my son, was born. I stared at it, the room tilting in slow motion, and thought of the night she told me she was pregnant. We cried together. I lifted her up in the kitchen, spinning her around like we were 20 again. She clung to me like I was everything. Now I couldn't even feel the floor. I set the test back in the box, sealed it, and placed it under a false panel in my workbench. I needed more time, more facts, more of everything. She still didn't know I knew. That would become my greatest weapon. I started watching her closer, quietly shifting into someone who could no longer afford to be the man he used to be. Mornings became data points. Afternoons turned into surveillance. I was polite, calm, helpful. The perfect husband, maybe even better than usual. She smiled at me more now, probably out of guilt. Or maybe she knew I was slipping away, and instinct kicked in to reel me back. But I wasn't the one being pulled anymore. I was digging, and what I found next would make my chest tighten so hard I had to steady myself on the kitchen counter. A week after finding the metal box, I made a call. My cousin Devin worked in the county records office and had access to things I couldn't get legally. I didn't ask him to break the law, just to bend it hard enough to let the light in. I gave him the tag code from the key, and a few days later, he called back with the name, Brent Thompson. I didn't know the guy, no friends with that name, not a colleague, but the initials, BT, matched the knife I left in the woods. That night, June said she had errands, took the SUV, left without dinner. I gave her a 20-minute head start, then followed. She didn't know I'd placed a small tile tracker behind the rear seat panel. She was predictable in her secrets. Always thought she was clever enough to hide things in plain sight. She drove straight to a pharmacy, stayed 15 minutes, then came out with a white paper bag. Her head was down, hoodie up despite the heat. She looked hunted. I didn't approach her. I trailed her from a block back, windows down, watching the bag crinkle between her fingers. When she turned toward the therapist's office downtown, I slowed to a stop and watched her go inside. 2 places in one trip, the pharmacy, then therapy. I didn't know what she bought, but I had guesses. Sleeping pills, anxiety meds, something to calm a storm, she started. The next morning I used the garage key. It was a rundown row of units behind a defunct auto shop. No cameras, no people. I waited until the street was dead, then parked a few blocks away and walked the rest. Unit 45A opened with a slow groan, and the smell that hit me was damp oil and old cotton. Inside was a world I didn't want to believe she belonged to. A motorbike, matte black, scratched on the sides like it had been laid down once or twice. A single mattress rolled out on the concrete floor, still indented where someone had slept. A sleeping bag, half zipped, reeking of smoke and cologne. Empty beer bottles near the wall. Then I saw the photos. Taped to the inside wall was a strip of them. Printed, maybe from an old camera, maybe on purpose to feel nostalgic. June in lingerie, her hair down, her face flushed and laughing. The kind of laughing she doesn't do at home anymore. One of the photos had her holding up a piece of cardboard with the words, "Run away with me," scrawled in black Sharpie. That one made my knees actually buckle. On the small metal desk next to the mattress was a note, handwritten, male scrawl, messy, desperate. "Next time I'll take you forever." And below that, a list, 3 names. First, June. Second, Alex. Third, child. Maybe mine. That's what it said, in parentheses. A question mark. Maybe mine? I sat on a folding chair that squealed under my weight and stared at the note. The ink had been pressed hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it wanted the words to last longer than paper usually allows. I didn't know whether to take the list as a threat or a fantasy, but either way, I wasn't going to be passive anymore. That night, I wrote a letter. Not from me, from Brent. I forged it carefully, matching the style of the one I'd found. "I don't care. He doesn't have long. You know what to do." I printed it, folded it, and slipped it between pages of a book she was reading. I waited. That night I lay awake, barely breathing, until I heard the pages flutter. I heard her gasp. Then nothing for a long time. Minutes passed. Then water. The shower turned on. She cried under the spray. I could hear it through the door, barely audible. But the sobs weren't theatrical. They were real. I think she thought she'd buried this thing deep enough that it would stay dead. But corpses have a funny way of clawing out if you don't bury them right. I didn't ask questions. In the morning, I acted like nothing happened. She was pale, eyes swollen, and left the house like a woman walking toward a noose. That's when I made the call to social services. Not to get her in trouble, not yet, just to put a flag on the account. Unstable behavior, potential danger to children. It was a warning, just one, and it worked. That evening, I picked up the kids from school and brought them to my sister's place. Told her I had a situation with June. Didn't go into details. She didn't press. I returned home alone. June got back just after sunset. Her shoes sounded different on the floor. Rushed, nervous. I was sitting at the kitchen table, calm, waiting, and across from me was my lawyer. He stood when she entered. She froze like a deer stepping into headlights. He handed her the first envelope. She didn't open it, just stood there, hands shaking, lower lip trembling. But not with fear, with recognition. She knew what was coming. She just didn't know how much I already knew. And I wasn't about to tell her. The moment she saw my lawyer standing in our kitchen, June froze like she'd stepped into ice. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in his hand, and something flickered behind her expression. Panic or recognition. Maybe both. She didn't ask questions, just sat down, stiff and silent, hands flat on the table like she was bracing for an earthquake. I didn't speak, didn't offer a single word. Just watched as she touched the envelope but didn't open it. Maybe she thought pretending long enough would rewind the clock, bring back the man who once believed every lie that poured from her mouth like sweet rain. But he was dead, buried under an oak tree next to a rusted box and a knife with another man's initials. That night, we moved around each other like strangers in a museum of our old life. She poured wine and forgot to drink it. At one point, she set 2 glasses on the counter like she always used to, then stared at the second like it belonged to someone else. I said nothing and went to bed alone. The next morning, I was out before sunrise. I drove to the auto shop where Brent Thompson worked, a place that looked like it hadn't passed a safety inspection in decades. Devin had found it for me. Brent was tall, wiry, with windburned skin and grease under his nails. I waited by his car, watched him spark a cigarette like it was the only thing holding him together. "Brent?" I asked. He nodded without looking at me. I handed him a folder. Inside, a photo of his bike, the garage key, and the letter from June I found in the box. He flipped through it, frowning, then stiffened. "What is this?" he said, stepping closer. "Evidence," I told him. "And a choice." I pulled out the second envelope, this one thicker. In it, motel receipts, snapshots, and the note he left her in the garage. "Next time I'll take you forever." His jaw worked, but no sound came out. He looked up at me like I was holding his life in my hand. And I was. "You leave," I said quietly. "No job, no state, no contact, or all of this hits every inbox I can find. Your boss, your ex, the cops. You won't be able to ride a bicycle without someone knowing what you are." He didn't argue, just stood there while the color drained from his face. 2 days later, Brent was gone. No forwarding address, no employment. Vanished. That same day, I walked into our bank with my lawyer and shut it all down. Every joint account, every credit card. I left her nothing with our names on it. The clerk didn't blink. She'd seen this before. Maybe not this cleanly executed, but she understood. Back at home, she tried to make lasagna, my favorite. The table was set, candles lit, the kind of scene that used to mean love. Now it looked like a hostage negotiation. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I went straight to the bedroom and locked the door. That's when she started cracking, leaving notes in my bag, cleaning obsessively, waking up early to make breakfast she wouldn't touch. One night she slipped into bed and pressed herself against me like she remembered who we used to be. I didn't respond. She cried into my shirt until her breath went soft and shallow. I let her. She wanted comfort from the man she betrayed, but that man wasn't there anymore. Then came the garage. It was early morning. I thought she'd gone for a walk. She always claimed she needed space, but her car was still in the driveway. I found her in the driver's seat, just sitting there. Engine off, window down. On the passenger seat, a bottle of sleeping pills. No cap. She didn't even flinch when I tapped the glass. Just turned her face toward me, pale and hollow-eyed, like a child who woke from a nightmare and couldn't remember why she was scared. I opened the door, took the bottle. No words. I didn't need to say anything. That was the moment I made the second call to my lawyer, the one that set emergency custody into motion. I filed a report with Child Services, logged her instability, and listed my sister's home as the kid's primary residence. June didn't fight it. She just nodded, like she'd expected everything to burn eventually, but she still didn't know how much I knew. She didn't know that the photo in the woods was just the beginning, or that I'd already dismantled the world she built behind my back, one piece at a time, and she definitely didn't know what I was going to do next. I woke up with a pressure in my chest that wasn't fear or sadness. It was calculation. I moved differently now, thought in angles, not feelings. She was still in the house, moving quieter these days, careful with every step like she thought noise alone might push me over some edge. She didn't know I wasn't anywhere near the edge. I was already across it. I needed her to crack, but not completely, not yet. So I planted the fuse. It started with a letter, a fake, from Brent, written on a yellowing scrap of paper I burned at the edges for effect. The handwriting. I'd studied it, copied it from the garage note. Then I slipped it under her pillow the night before I knew she'd be changing the sheets. A simple message. I don't care. He doesn't have long. You know what to do. I waited. That night she barely spoke. She overcooked dinner, left the sink full, disappeared into the bathroom with the water running so long, I wondered if she drowned in it. When she came out, she didn't say a word, just moved like her skin itched from the inside. Something had sunk its teeth into her, and I was counting on it to fester. The next morning she bolted, left the house like it was on fire, didn't even take her coffee. I checked the tracker. She drove straight to the therapist's office again, stayed 30 minutes, then took a detour to the pharmacy. Picked up another bottle of the same sleeping pills I'd taken from the car. No prescription refill. This was cash. Off record. I acted fast. I called social services again, pushed the situation forward, claimed she was unstable, maybe even suicidal, said I was concerned about her being around the kids. Gave them the file, the pills, the note. It was enough. That night my sister picked up the kids from school and kept them. No protest from June. She knew the walls were closing, but she didn't know I was the one sealing every window shut. When she came home, the lights were already on, and sitting at the dining table was my lawyer. Again. This time he wasn't alone. He brought paperwork, custody filings, financial freezes, warnings. She walked in like a woman who'd already been hit and was waiting for the next blow. I didn't say a thing, just watched as her eyes scanned the documents like she didn't recognize the language anymore. Then came the final piece of the trap. Brent. He thought I was finished with him, thought that disappearing meant he'd escaped. He was wrong. I went to his work again, this time in a different state, where he thought he could hide behind a new name and a low-level warehouse job. I handed him a second folder, a copy of the photos, a copy of June's letter from the metal box, the garage images. I said only one thing. This goes public, or you go. He flinched, like the past had reached out and wrapped around his throat. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to threaten. I had the kind of calm a man only earns by walking through fire and learning he can live with the burns. Brent left within 48 hours. Quit. Packed. Gone again. And that same day, the accounts went dark. Every credit card with both our names. Every joint checking account. Every line of credit. My lawyer and I pulled it all down in silence. The bank manager nodded with that same tired look. She'd seen this before, just maybe not this calculated. I came home late that night. June was waiting, eyes red, hands fidgeting with her sleeves like she didn't know what else to hold on to. The kitchen smelled like lasagna again. She'd cleaned the house, lit candles, even played soft jazz on the stereo like we were still pretending. I didn't sit, didn't eat. I just walked past her, into our bedroom, and locked the door. A minute later, I heard her drop the plate. The crash echoed through the walls like a starter pistol. I knew what came next. The begging, the bargaining. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching. I saw how she tried to play normal, how she touched me like a stranger, fumbling her way back into a life she barely understood. She thought there was still a version of me who wanted to forgive. But I wasn't here for forgiveness. I was here to pull the curtain back and watch her unravel on stage. That night I retrieved a box from the shed, an old moving box with copies of every letter, photo, receipt, and note. Even a small USB drive with footage from the camera I'd planted in her car weeks ago. She didn't know I'd seen her breaking down in the parking lot, screaming into her phone, not yelling at anyone, just screaming into the void. I waited for morning. We had court the next day, and she still thought she had a card left to play. She didn't know I'd already burned the deck. The courthouse smelled like cold metal and old paper, the kind of air that carries judgment. I sat with my lawyer in the hallway, flipping through the folder one last time. Custody filings, photos, financial statements, and that USB drive sitting in its slot like a trigger ready to be pulled. Across from me, June clutched a tissue in one hand and wore makeup thick enough to crack. Her hair was perfect, her blouse crisp, but something about the way she sat, crooked, jittery, gave her away. She was fraying at the edges, trying to hold herself together with the last threads of denial. Then I saw it, a bruise, faint but real, blooming beneath her left eye. Subtle enough to pass for an accident, deliberate enough to speak a lie without words. I didn't move. Let her set the stage. Inside the courtroom, she launched first. Her attorney, smug and rehearsed, painted me as volatile, controlling, said I had a temper, that I hit her. June cried, voice shaking, eyes darting between the judge and her lawyer like she didn't trust either. Her story was dramatic, passionate, carefully plotted, except for one thing. I had the ending. When it was my turn, I said nothing at first. Just past the flash drive to the bailiff, the judge slid on a pair of glasses, plugged it into the courtroom monitor, and the video began. There she was, in our driveway, standing next to the car. The door cracked open, her hand gripping the edge. Then, in full clarity, June slamming the door into her own face. Once, twice, hard enough to leave a mark. Then she paused, checking her reflection in the mirror. I watched the judge lean forward. My lawyer didn't even look up. He'd seen it already, twice. The room stayed quiet after the video ended. No gasps, just silence, thick and stunned. Temporary custody, awarded to me. Full financial control, granted, pending final division. June shouted in protest, claimed it was edited, manipulated. Her voice pitched into a scream, echoing off the courtroom walls. But the judge didn't even flinch. She was dismissed like static on a bad signal. And still, we weren't done. My lawyer stood slowly, his voice calm, clear, deliberate. We haven't even started, he said. Next case, fraud and conspiracy to endanger life. I watched June freeze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her fingers gripped the back of the chair in front of her so tight her knuckles turned bone white. She stared at me like I just walked out of the shadows with a knife she didn't know I carried. And then she ran, right there in front of everyone. She stumbled out of the courtroom like her legs didn't belong to her anymore. I didn't follow. I just sat down and took a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That afternoon, we emptied what was left. The accounts, already frozen, were transferred. The joint cards shredded. I moved into a small 2-bedroom near my sister's place. Temporary but quiet. The kids adapted faster than I expected. My son never asked why his mom didn't pick him up. My daughter only asked if we could keep the new house forever. June, meanwhile, disappeared. Not physically. She still existed in paperwork and angry voicemails. But the woman who used to make pancakes on Saturdays and hum in the garden? Gone. Replaced by this twitching echo that couldn't decide whether to beg or blame. She showed up at my office once. Sat in the parking lot in her car for over an hour. Didn't come in. Just sat there with the engine running, staring at the building like she was waiting for something to give. It never did. Later that week, I found something wedged into the mailbox at my temporary place. No envelope, just a note. I never wanted to hurt you. I was drowning and didn't know how to say it. I thought if I ran fast enough, I could outrun who I became. I can't. It wasn't signed. She didn't have to. I read it once, then folded it and burned it in the kitchen sink. There's no comfort in apologies that come after the explosion. There's no healing in words meant to fix a life someone else shattered with their bare hands. The next step was Brent. I hadn't heard a word since he vanished. No calls, no texts, no threats. But when my cousin flagged a background hit on him, I knew what had to happen. Turns out, Brent Thompson wasn't just a liar and a coward. He was a wanted man. 2 states away, different name, but the same trail. Assault, intimidation, illegal weapons. His name had been passed around before, just never with enough weight to stick, until now. My cousin sent the file to a detective in that district, someone with a personal interest in missing pieces. Brent's name lit up a few alerts. Suddenly, things moved fast. I didn't need to press charges. The system was already sharpening its teeth. I just gave them the scent. And as the storm shifted direction, I started preparing for something else. A new chapter. Something blank. Something quiet. But not before I left behind one final message. The morning of the final hearing was colder than expected. That sharp kind of chill that slices through a coat and settles in your bones. I parked in my usual spot behind the courthouse, sipped coffee that had long gone bitter, and watched the front steps like they were a stage. She arrived late. No makeup this time. Hair unbrushed. Her walk was slow, mechanical, like she was being led somewhere she already knew she'd lose. She looked smaller somehow, like the gravity of everything had finally begun to compress her. The courthouse hallway was silent as we waited for the bailiff. My lawyer sat beside me, unbothered, flipping through his notes. Across from us, June stared at the floor, knees bouncing. Her lawyer wasn't with her. He dropped her as a client 3 days earlier, citing non-cooperation and emotional instability. She hadn't replaced him, just showed up alone, wearing a bruise under her eye that wasn't fresh anymore, but dark enough to still catch stares. She was going to try something. I knew that, and she didn't disappoint. When the judge asked her to speak, June stood, tears already running, voice shaking with practiced desperation. She said I was emotionally abusive, that I kept the children from her, that I manipulated the system. She waved around the bruise like a trophy, hoping the courtroom would gasp, would flinch, would feel for her. But no one did, because I stood calmly and asked permission to submit Exhibit 14, video evidence, time-stamped, clear, indisputable, of her slamming her face into the car door. Twice. The judge watched. So did the clerk. June didn't. She just sat down halfway through, buried her face in her hands, and started shaking. But it wasn't grief. It was rage. She'd built this performance so carefully, so thoroughly, and I had torn it apart in under 2 minutes. The ruling came down like steel. Temporary full custody extended. Joint accounts to remain frozen. June to undergo psychiatric evaluation before supervised visitation could even be considered. And that's when she snapped. She screamed in open court that I'd tricked her, that everyone was blind, that this was all some grand conspiracy. She cursed the judge, accused my lawyer of seduction, claimed I had framed her. People gasped then, not out of sympathy, out of disbelief, out of the raw, surreal collapse of the woman unraveling in front of them. She was escorted out, but as she passed, she looked at me, and I swear her eyes were nothing but void, no pain, no regret, just that strange, hungry kind of hate, like she was already planning something, like she thought the game wasn't over. But I was already 2 moves ahead. That night, I got a call from the psychiatric facility. She'd been admitted involuntarily. Her behavior outside the courtroom had escalated. Threats, paranoia, disassociation. She was no longer fit to make decisions for herself, let alone our children. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel relief, just a hollow sense of confirmation. Everything I suspected, everything I feared, had turned out to be real. and worse. While she was inside, I made quiet moves, sold the house, signed the final paperwork. My lawyer handled everything. June's mother was granted temporary medical proxy, and I delivered one last thing to her personally, a small black box. Same kind as the one I'd found buried months ago. Inside, the knife with BT's initials, the folded photo of June in the tent, the letter she never knew I had, and a note from me. I loved her. She chose lies. Her mother didn't speak, just stared at the contents with a kind of grief that words couldn't carry. I left without waiting for her to say anything. The following week, I bought land in Montana. Remote, quiet, room to build. I didn't want cities anymore. I didn't want people who smiled while they lied. I wanted sky, firewood, distance, truth. The kids and I drove for 2 days. No radio, just wind and the hum of tires. They didn't cry when we crossed the state line. Didn't ask about her. They just stared out the windows like they were waiting for something that didn't come. When we reached the new house, just a shell, still being framed, I stood in the empty living room with them in my arms. Dust everywhere. No furniture, no curtains, no history, just air and silence. I knelt down, pulled them in close, and whispered, "We're starting from a blank page." I wasn't sure if I said it for them or for myself. The mornings in Montana were colder than I expected, the kind of cold that crept through window frames and settled in your jaw. But there was something clean about it, something honest. I'd wake early before the kids stirred and just stand on the back porch, coffee in hand, watching the frost paint the grass silver. No cars, no voices, no shadow creeping in from the past. At least not at first. But ghosts don't need permission to return. It started with a phone call, blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. A woman's voice, soft but panicked. June's mother. She said June had vanished, slipped out during a scheduled appointment. She'd been getting better, or pretending to. Medication compliant, saying all the right things. The doctors thought she was stable, thought she could handle a supervised visit in a few weeks. But now she was gone. That night I loaded the shotgun and left it by the front door. Not because I thought she'd come, but because part of me hoped she would. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the dirt road that led to our property, waiting for headlights that never came. Instead, I got a letter. No postage. Hand-delivered. Folded tight. Slipped between the front door and frame. "You ruined everything. He was going to save me. But you couldn't let go. I gave you a way out. You should have taken it." No name, no signature. But the writing, hers. The same looped lowercase g. The same desperate scratches when she pressed too hard with the pen. I burned the note in the fireplace without reading it twice. The next day I called the sheriff. By then, the state police were already involved. Turns out Brent hadn't just run from me. He'd run from an open case across state lines. Threats, stalking, breaking and entering. They tracked him down in Arizona 2 weeks later. Alone, armed, cornered. When they breached the motel, he didn't even move. Just sat on the edge of the bed, hands in his lap, staring at the wall like he'd been waiting for something that never showed. In his bag, a photo of June. One of the ones from the garage, folded so many times the edges were barely holding. Back in Montana, the snow began to fall. Thick, quiet blankets that made the world look untouched. I kept my head down. Got the kids into school. Cut wood. Built shelves. Found peace in the weight of nails and planks, in things that didn't lie, didn't cheat. But I couldn't shake the sense that she wasn't done. And I was right. It came one morning in a letter from her attorney. She wanted to see the kids. She claimed to be healthy again. Claimed she'd recovered. Claimed she was still their mother. There was no threat in the letter, just a plea, a legal one. But beneath the paper, I could feel it breathing. Desperation dressed up in civility. My lawyer handled it, filed motions, blocked contact. Still, she found a way to reach me. An email this time. "You stole them from me. You turned them against me. But they'll see one day. They'll see I was the only one who ever loved them the right way." I didn't respond. I printed it, filed it, but I didn't respond. I knew her kind of madness, the kind that swore it was love while it burned everything to ash. She hadn't changed. She'd just gone quiet long enough to sound sane again, and I had no more room in my life for liars in disguise. 3 months passed. Then one morning I got a call. A social worker. Polite. Measured. She said June had been committed again. Voluntary this time. Said she'd come in crying, shaking, asking for help. Said she was hearing things. Seeing people in the trees. Said her ex-husband had poisoned the kids against her. That we'd locked her out of a life that was hers. I thanked the woman, hung up, and stepped outside. Snow still covered the hills. My daughter was making tiny footprints in the white, chasing her brother, laughter bouncing off the trees. They were happy. They were whole. And she was gone again. Maybe for good this time. The last thing I did before walking back inside was take one of the old moving boxes from the shed. The final one I hadn't burned. Inside the photos, the receipts, the notes, all of it. I carried it to the fire pit, lit the match, watched it catch. The pages curled, blackened, floated like ash leaves in the wind. I stood there until the box was nothing but embers and memory, until the smoke no longer smelled like her. And I whispered to myself, not out of rage, not even out of pain, just clarity. Let her burn. Not the woman, not even the marriage, just the story, the version of her I once loved, the one that never truly existed. I walked back inside, shut the door, held my kids, and turned the page for good. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.